From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bayview Town of Lake Captains, brought to you by the Historic Bayview Lake Captains Society. And I'm here today in front of the former home of Captain Carl Christensen on Oklahoma Avenue. Now, Captain Christensen was something special. He really was. He ended up captaining the most ships by twofold than any other lake captain in Bayview, and that number was 16 ships he captained. All of them while he lived here in this house for 40 years, folks. Pretty amazing, just that alone, but I haven't even got started yet. In fact, I'm going to probably forget some things. There's so much about Carl Christensen. Now, to be fair now, 14 of those were all with the Pittsburgh Steamship Company, and 2 were with the U.S. Coast Guard, so a little bit of a difference there. I call it 16. If you want to say just the non-Coast Guard, it's 14. It's still double the next closest captain in terms of numbers of ships captained while living in Bayview. Okay, so before immigrating from Norway, he served as a crewman on sailing ships. So just like James Leask, the other Leask brothers, so many others from that northern part of Europe before they came over here, the Whalebacks sailed on sailing ships. I mean, they were all sail trained, which is, if you know, being a crewman on a sailing ship in those days was not easy. He comes to Milwaukee, 1911 is when he immigrates, signs up as a crewman on a probable steamship, and then very quickly thereafter he becomes a captain. Big, huge cargo ships. You'll see it coming up in the narration. Now, I could talk forever, but that's not why I have Simon Stanhope narrating for us here, along with slides, pictures of the ships, all coming up. So I will leave it at that. Hope you enjoy this one. This is a good one, folks. Really special guy. And he did it all as an immigrant from Norway, oh, by the way. Just when you think you found a lake captain in Bayview that's done it all, you find another one. So this is just the latest. Hope you enjoy it. Remember, hats off to our Bayview lake captains. I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Here is the map of lake captains' homes in Bayview to show you where this episode takes place. Its location focuses primarily on the large green arrow. Today we will be discussing the life of Captain Carl M. Christensen, who was born in Norway. As a teenager there, he sailed the Atlantic aboard windjammer sailing ships as a crewman. After immigrating to the USA and Milwaukee in 1911, he began working as a crewman aboard steamships with the Pittsburgh Steamship Company, abbreviated PSC. That included one of the famous Great Lake ship types known as a whaleback design. When America entered the First World War, he served in the U.S. Navy. In the late 1920s, he took a hiatus from the PSC to captain 2 ships for the U.S. Coast Guard. That included a lightship anchored in Lake Michigan, 5 miles off Escanaba. After that, he then continued on for the rest of his life with the PSC as captain of its steamships. In all, Captain Christensen captained 14 different Great Lakes steamships for them, all while living for 40 years in the same house on Oklahoma Avenue in Bayview, making him Bayview's most prolific ship captain. Including his 4 years sailing the Atlantic while growing up in Norway, he spent nearly 50 years at sea. Captain Carl M. Christensen was born in Larvik, Norway, on 6th July 1891, as Carl M. Kaupang. He immigrated from Norway directly to Milwaukee, via the arrival port of New York, arriving on 19th April 1911. The fact that he came straight to Milwaukee of any choice he could have made in the US, would seem to indicate he had other family here, or friends of his parents back in Norway, to help him and guide him. His parents appear to have not immigrated with him, and remained behind in Norway. He would have been 20 when he immigrated, and it appears at least one brother, 2 years younger than him, Louis, and possibly a sister, Iva, Martha, came with him, though Iva settled in New Jersey. Another brother, Osbjorn, and a sister, Annie, stayed behind in Norway with his and their parents. Why just he, one brother and one sister, decided to leave Norway for the USA, while 2 other siblings and both his parents remained behind in Norway, is unknown. Perhaps in Carl's case, he learned through Norwegian friends that had immigrated to Milwaukee that the Great Lakes had more sailing jobs available and more opportunities for advancement, including chances to make captain, than existed at home in Norway. Perhaps, as part of that, he was able to secure a better-paying job that he could have ever found in Norway, and could send money home to his parents. This is all unknown, however. After he immigrated, he changed his last name from Kopang to Christensen. It was clear from the very beginning that Carl Christensen was destined for a career at sea. As a teenager, while still living in Norway, he was a crewman on ocean-going sailing ships, the classic windjammers, and is documented to have sailed on long voyages from Norway to England, Canada, and even South America. Undoubtedly, this would have involved climbing the rigging and climbing out on the masts to pull in sails in many a gale. If ever there was a sailor who was straight from the golden age of sail on the world's oceans, it was Carl Christensen. He was the quintessential sailor people envision when reading, thinking and talking about sailing the 7 seas of the world on the great and magnificent sailing ships of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And he was to bring this spectacular saltwater sailing background with him when he came to live in Bayview, Wisconsin. After he arrived in Milwaukee on 19th April 1911, he immediately secured a job at age 20 as a crewman on the steamer Corona, owned by the Pittsburgh Steamship Company, PSC. By 1916, still working for the PSC, he had advanced to second mate on the company's steamship Homer D. Williams. By 1917, aged 25, was mate on its steamer Samuel Mather, a famous whaleback ship. And by 1923, second mate on the PSC's steamer James B. Nielsen. When World War I broke out, he served just for 1918 in the USN. He would ultimately remain under the employ of the PSC for the next 45 years, minus a probable 5-year hiatus with the U.S. Coast Guard. Ultimately, his total sailing years on the Great Lakes would total 46. If we add on the sailing ships out of Norway at age 16, then he would have, and likely did, spent a total of 50 years of his life on the water, salt and fresh. His earliest recorded address is on the west side of Milwaukee on 38th Street from 1914 through 1918. His occupation for 4 of these 5 years is sailor. On 12th September 1916, he became a naturalized U.S. citizen. He departed his residence on 38th Street in 1920 for 2327 East Bennett Avenue in Bayview, working as second mate, the steamship James B. Nielsen. He then married wife Mabel in 1921, when she was 28, born in Wisconsin, though her parents were Norwegian, and he was 29. He likely remained living at 2327 East Bennett Avenue through 1923, though this is undocumented. In 1924, Carl and Mabel Christensen moved with their daughter Violet and 2 sons, George and Milton, to 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue. It was their second home in Bayview, and they would remain here for the next 41 years. While he lived in Bayview, he captained 14 different ships, not including probable captain of 2 different U.S. Coast Guard ships, which would actually make it 16 ships, all steamships of the PSC, making him the most prolific lake captain in Bayview maritime history. He also served as first mate on at least 5 different ships while living in Bayview. Perhaps even more amazing is that, like fellow PSC and Bayview captain Colin Carlyle, Carl Christensen accomplished all of this with just an 8th grade education. Because these ships are so numerous for Captain Christensen, they are provided together, along with his positions aboard, after this general discussion of his life. There are 3 years when he is not officially listed at 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue, though no doubt continued to own the home, and Mabel lived there with the children. These are 1925, 27, and 29. Coincidentally, for 1927 and 29, there are 2 U.S. Coast Guard vessels that may show him as captain. In 1927, a Captain Christensen is reported in command of the cutter Crawford, home-ported at Two Harbors, Minnesota, and participating in a rescue during a gale. In 1929, a Captain C. Christensen is listed in command of the 11-foot shoal lightship, positioned at its anchorage in Lake Michigan, 5 miles off Escanaba, Michigan, in Green Bay. And perhaps even more than that, the years 1924, when he first moved to 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue, through 1929, do not show him connected with any ship, especially any ship of the PSC, where he is documented to have been employed, with several ships he stayed aboard known, before moving to Bayview. Therefore, it is entirely possible, if not probable, though this is conjecture, that he took a hiatus with the PSC to serve in the Coast Guard from 1924 to 1929, commanding at least 2 ships, the Crawford and the 11-foot shoal lightship. He then returned to the PSC in 1930, where he would remain a lake captain through his final command in 1956, when he retired at age 65. He kept his permanent home in Bayview throughout. During World War II, while he continued as captain for the above ships of the PSC, he also served as a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Coast Guard, though his activities there during the war are unknown. It's possible, since he was already a qualified lake captain, this was an appointment strictly for when and if his services were ever needed. In May 1945, Captain Christensen appears to have joined with 3 other probable captains of the PSC, including former Bayview Lake Captain Colin Carlyle, to engage in a speedboat race against the famous 20th Century Limited passenger train from Albany, New York, to New York City. This may have been, since they are likely representing the PSC, because train travel, and the freight it could carry, was getting more and more reliable and faster. Perhaps the men did this to show it was still faster to go by water than by train, thus promoting PSC and Great Lakes sailing commerce, though this is unknown. They beat the train and won the race. Captain Christensen and wife Mabel raised their 3 children, Violet, born in 1922, George, born in 1923, and Milton, born in 1926, at 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue, and they all attended Bayview High School. Milton was the only one of their children born in Bayview. After graduating from high school in 1941, George briefly attended the University of Wisconsin, Madison, before enlisting in the U.S. Army Air Corps in 1942, and flew as a pilot of B-24 bombers over Nazi-occupied Europe during World War II. Milton, 3 years younger, wouldn't have graduated high school until later in 1944, so while it is possible he would have served in the war, his record is unknown, though he is reported serving as a private in the military in 1951, stationed in Baltimore, Maryland. After high school, Violet, and later Milton, after the war, both attended St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. About 15 miles south of Minneapolis, St. Olaf was, and is today, a private liberal arts college that was founded in 1874 by Norwegian Lutheran immigrants. It is named after Olaf II Haraldsson, King of Norway, from 1016 until 1030. He was killed at the Battle of Stiklestad, making him Norway's patron saint and eternal king. As for son George, he attended the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee after the conclusion of World War II. While son Milton is shown at St. Olaf College, being accepted into its Viking male chorus as it was about to resume practice after a 4-year hiatus due to the war, daughter Violet initially went to the Lutheran Bible Institute in Minneapolis for a short time, before also moving over to attend St. Olaf. She received a Bachelor of Arts degree there and worked for several years in Lutheran churches in Minnesota and Milwaukee. She also became vice president of the national group, the Lutheran Daughters of Reformation. Not long after this, Violet Christensen died on 7th June 1951 at home at 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue as the result of a long and serious illness. She was just 29. Carl and Mabel Christensen had Violet buried at Milwaukee's Arlington Cemetery after a service at Our Saviour's Lutheran Church. Violet's photo, published in her obituary, is quite striking, the epitome of happiness in youth. After Violet's death, Carl Christensen went on to captain another 3 ships, and then retired in 1956. He continued living at 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue with wife Mabel in retirement. Then in 1962 Mabel died, and Carl lived on at 2348 East Oklahoma for 4 more years, until moving out in 1966 to 1831 North Cambridge Avenue, possibly a seniors' centre, on Milwaukee's Lower East Side, opposite McKinley Marina. 2 years later, in June 1968, when he reached age 77, he moved to the state of Maryland to live with his son Milton. 8 months later, on 9th February 1969, Captain Carl M. Christensen, the most prolific lake captain in Bayview history, died. After services at Our Saviour Lutheran Church on Wisconsin Avenue, he was buried next to wife Mabel and daughter Violet in Arlington Park Cemetery. Of interest is that the gravestone, first made when Violet died, only allows for 3 names, Violet, Mabel and Carl, even though there were 2 more sons, George and Milton. This may be because of Mabel's and Carl's love for Violet, and an indicator of just how profoundly her death affected them. Milton died in 1998, aged 73, and though he appears to have spent most of his life in Maryland, he is buried with wife Anne in the same plot as his mother and father, at Arlington Park. His gravestone is virtually identical to that of his mother, father and Violet, a testimony to family unity and a statement of the high regard held for them. Oldest son George lived the longest of the children, making it to age 98 and dying on 30th November 2020. After the war, he returned home to Milwaukee, where he remained for nearly all of the rest of his life. Like Violet and Milton, he is also at Arlington Park, where he was buried with military honours in early December 2020. We will now proceed with the listing of ships for Captain Carl Christensen. As previously mentioned, because there were so many, it was decided to provide them here at the end, so as not to disrupt the continuity of his biography. They are all steamships. While living in Milwaukee, the Corona, crewman, 1911. The Homer D. Williams, second mate, 1916. The Samuel Mather, of the famous whaleback ship design, mate, 1917. While living in Bayview at 2327 East Bennett Avenue, the James B. Nielsen, second mate, 1923. While living in Bayview at 2348 East Oklahoma Avenue, 1924 to 65. U.S. Coast Guard cutter Crawford, captain, 1927. 11-foot shoal lightship, believed to have been captain, 1929. George G. Crawford, first mate, 1934. Richard V. Linderbury, first mate, 1936. Mauna Loa, captain, 1937. Joshua A. Hatfield, first mate, 1937. Henry H. Rogers, first mate, 1939. Matafa, captain, 1940. Robert W. E. Bunsen, captain, 1941–42. Malitoa, captain, 1943. Francis E. House, captain, 1943. Henry Phipps, captain, 1944–45. Alva C. Dinky, captain, 1946. William J. Olcott, captain, 1947. George G. Crawford, captain, 1948. Percival Roberts, captain, 1949. And, lastly, the Homer D. Williams, captain, 1950–52. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. If you'd like to read more details about Captain Carl M. Christensen, as well as the sources for the information contained in today's video, you can find these and more in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, for sale now by individual volumes on both Amazon.com and HenschelHouseBooks.com. All proceeds from book sales go to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to contribute to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all donations and contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider contributing to us through the listings found on our website under the Contribute button. Note, we are not a 501c3, so contributions are not tax-deductible. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. That is the only surviving intact ship, once captained by at least 2, and likely 3, different Bayview lake captains. Finally, we also have free self-guided walking tours of Bayview's 71 lake captains' homes, using only your phone. It's simple and easy. Just go to the website shown here, find the item on the menu bar at the upper left named Free Self-Guided Walking Tours, and then scroll down to find the map with instructions. Zoom in by street. When you find a captain's house you're interested in, click on it and details appear on the right, along with a link to the YouTube episode from this channel that provides the biography of the captain that lived there. You can also read about his sailing adventures while living in that particular house by going to the website menu item, Sailing Adventures, and looking up his name. It's free, fun, and available any time you're out walking. Just bring along your phone. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.